I've been a branding designer for the past 5 years, and through my branding studio, Coastical Designs, I've worked with hundreds of clients. Freelancing has completely changed my life. Not only have I been able to pursue my lifelong dream, traveling around the world, but I've also been able to meet incredible people, incredible clients, as well as expanding and growing and evolving so much as a human being. If I had to start all over again, starting from 0 clients, 0 experience, and 0 income, this is the exact checklist that I would go through in order to get to my first $10,000. We're going to be going through this step by step. So we're first going to start off with how you can make your first $100 and then your first $1,000 and then ultimately your first $10,000. I've also included chapters for this video, so feel free to skip around. You can also find the timestamps in the description below. And if you are somebody who's ready to do the real work, I'm not just talking about watching these videos, but actually transforming. I provide worksheets for every single one of my videos. In these worksheets, I provide introspective journaling prompts as well as practical exercises to help you tap into your limiting beliefs and to help you write an action plan so you can start living out as your highest self today. The link to access these worksheets are down in the description below. Now let's dive into the video. Let's talk about how you can earn your first $100, and I like to call this the trial season. The very first step is to identify your zone of genius. We're gonna identify where your unique sweet spot is. So we're gonna find a combination of what you're good at, what is fun or energizing to you, and what are people buying. So let's start with the very first part. What are you good at? What is something that naturally comes to you? Is it your eye for design? Is it the fact that you understand code and technology? That every single person has a different intelligence that was born within them. A really interesting question that you can ask yourself is, what is something that you find easy that a lot of people find hard? And the reason why a lot of people fail at freelancing is because they do not actively look into what their natural gifts are. The second part is, what is fun and energizing to you? If you had to spend over 10 hours learning about this one subject and getting really good at this one skill, would you be down? What kind of work can you do for 10 plus hours that a lot of people may see that as hard work, but to you, it's completely enjoyable. It's super fun to you. While it is nice to be good at something, if you're not excited, if you're not energized by the very thing that you're good at, then when you go into this path a lot further down the road, when you're pursuing more clients, when you're expanding your business, it is going to feel so much more painful to show up every day. And it's really common for businesses to go through a dip period where it takes a lot of resilience, it takes a lot of patience to see their business grow and expand. And the third part to knowing your zone of genius is, what are people exactly buying? We must look at the market now, and is there a visible demand that people are looking specifically for this skill? They're looking for someone to solve this specific problem. If the problem doesn't exist, it's going to be really hard to convince people to buy what you're offering. A very simple rule of thumb, if you do not know if your skill set is going to actually solve a problem, what you can do is ask yourself, does my skill touch one of these 3 evergreen demands? Health, wealth, and relationships. If your skill does indeed solve one of these problems, then you're good to go. Keep in mind that if you are still in the beginning stages, you do not need to choose a niche or find a specialized area. This is your experimental phase where you're figuring out what kind of clients do you like working with? What kind of problems do you like solving? What kind of niche do you see yourself working with? The second step is to get really good at your skill. Back in 2020, when I was first starting my business, I had absolutely no experience with Adobe Illustrator. I didn't know how to use any sort of online graphic design tools. I used Skillshare and I signed up for a 3-month free trial. And that alone helped me learn so much about this software, about this skill, and it got me paying clients right away. Don't overthink and don't overwhelm yourself by trying to learn everything you need to know about this industry, about this skill. But take small steps. Allocate at least 2 hours a day working on building your skill set. Because again, if you don't have experience, you need to get experience somewhere. Whether you are at your first 1 figure to your first 10 figures, learning and improving your skill set is a never-ending process. Another thing is that you do not only want to focus on consuming. The fact is, if you're always focused on consuming and you're not applying and creating and reflecting in the process, you're not actually going to improve on your skill. You need to start doing. And how you can do that is to start building a portfolio. Yes, you don't have any clients right now, but clients need to see your work in order to say, yeah, I do want to work with you because your eye, your design, your skills are the exact fit in what I need. You can ask ChatGPT to create a mock project, or you can create something for a brand that you already love. When you are creating your portfolio, it is important to keep a vague idea of who you want your ideal client to be, who matches the aesthetic or matches the skill set that you're offering. For example, if you are an aspiring branding designer, then you have this eye for this minimal aesthetic luxury design feel, then you would want your portfolio to reflect exactly that. Don't try to be vague and try to make a logo for a very rugged, male-dominant industry and then go to like a very flowery, girly type, because you are going to attract very conflicting audiences. So it is important to keep your portfolio in a singular theme based on the kind of clients that you want to attract. Again, you do not have to figure this out immediately, but just keep a very vague idea of who this person is. When you are building this portfolio, all of this is just a base, and this portfolio will grow with the amount of clients that you work with over time. After you've created your portfolio, now it's time to dive into step 3, which is making yourself known by putting yourself on multiple different freelancer platforms. These platforms include Fiverr, Upwork, Freelancer. I know if you haven't worked with any clients yet, you don't have any experience, a lot of people would tell you to work for free. I actually do not agree with that. I believe that if you built a portfolio, it means that you have the skills to help someone solve a problem. In my experience, people rarely value what they don't invest in. If you don't believe me, think about this. Have you ever bought a course that was worth $5,000 or maybe $300? Like, you put a whole lump sum of money into this course. But if you bought another course that was worth $0, it was completely free. Which course are you going to take more seriously? You're obviously going to be more emotionally invested in the course that you invested $5,000 in. And in fact, it makes you value that course more because you believe that there's jam-packed value and it can transform your life. The same psychology applies to your clients as well. You may not have a competitive advantage right now because you are just starting, but what your advantage could be is your price. That's how you can funnel in clients to work with you so you can continually build your testimonials, build out your portfolio, and really gather more experience working one-on-one with clients. Why I think it is so important to start your career through these platforms is, number one, you don't have to do as much marketing because that platform is already attracting clientele. And number two, there is a lower barrier to entry so that if you don't have that much experience, you can still apply to work on these platforms. I started Fiverr right at the get-go, and right when I created my profile, I created and differentiated my gig, I was getting paying clients immediately. And I had no experience. I was not ready at all, but I just put myself out there, and I knew that I will never be able to improve my skill set unless I was actually doing more of it. If you don't have any experience, be okay with charging low for now, but also focus on wowing your customers. Your first few clients that you get are really important, and it doesn't matter how much you are charging them. The fact is that they gave you a chance, and now you can prove your chance by doing your best work. As you work with more clients and you build up more experience, you build up your testimonials, your reviews are high, then it gives you more leverage to confidently raise up your prices. Even if someone pays you $10, that is a win because it shows that you are providing value to someone and you're solving their problem. And when you do an amazing job, they will tell their friends and family, and you'll find that these people also have very similar networks of people in the same industry that have the same problems. And when they tell them about you, then you get to work with more people. They are also going to be your first case studies. So collect your portfolio and talk about how you solved their problem. Where were they at before their journey? And when you started working with them, what What kind of problems did you solve? How did you improve their life? It's important for you to always collect evidence on how you are helping people, not only to give yourself more confidence that you are changing people's lives, but it also helps you come up with that list so that when you're talking to clients, you can actually share your wins with them and convince them to work with you. And to leave a lasting impression, it is important to always deliver on the things that you promised. Once you made your first $100, this is now an important time to reflect. Is this right for me? Is this something that I eventually want to grow? Does this feel good to me? Do I see myself scaling this? Sometimes freelancing can sound really good in theory, but once you're working with clients, then you can actually think about, is this something that I want to do long term? Or do I see myself pivoting into something else? But if you are excited to go deeper, it is time to get more serious, and we're gonna dive into the steps to get you to your first $1,000. In this step of getting to your first $1,000 is where we're gonna get serious about building your foundation. The very first step is to learn how to make your services and make your offer sexy to the right person. People who have a very general niche, people who are very general problem solvers. It's usually pretty easy to find clients when you're charging a lower rate, but the higher you go, specifically if you want to reach your first 10,000, your prices have to change too, because you simply do not have that much time to be able to work with 500 clients to get to your ideal goal. That simply is not realistic. So we must be brave enough to change our prices. And how can we do that? We need to start being more niche around the types of people and the types of problem we serve. Because there are so many options on the internet already. It is an endless pool of candidates, of freelancers that all offer the same exact skills as you. So in a sea of competition, how can you stand out? Now, this part is where we're going to identify what your niche is. So since you've already worked with several clients, now it's important to reflect. The very first part is to start identifying who your ideal client is. What type of person do you enjoy working with? What stage of life or business are they in? What do they value? Do they care about speed, aesthetics, results, feeling seen? The second part is, what specific problem are you going to help them with? Freelancers often focus on what they do. So I make logos, but clients care about what that skill set does for them. So I help you stand out and raise your prices so your brand feels exactly like you. You want to be so familiar in what your customer is going through, what their problems are, what their day-to-day is like, and to really get into the zone of understanding how they're viewing their life and how you can step in and change that for them. So ask yourself the following questions. What is my client struggling with before they hire me? What outcome are they really buying? How does my service solve a problem they'd pay to have fixed? Please do not try to please everyone. I think naturally a lot of freelancers make this mistake, and they want to serve as many people as possible, obviously. But when you become a generalist, a jack of all trades, a master of none, you water down your value by a lot. Your brand becomes very generic, your positioning is unclear, and the people that hop into your profile and want to look at what you're about, what your skill set is like, people will not have a clear understanding of what your true value is. While a generalist would say, I make websites, what a person who has a niche would say is, I help coaches launch high converting websites that feel like them and sell for them. Do you see the difference between the two? Because the second one feels more impact driven. It feels like, yes, that person can help me with my problem. And ideally, you should always use terms that your ideal client would use and can understand. Do not try to put in complex jargon or using big words just to try to sound smarter. In fact, if a fourth grader can't understand what you do, then it's not clear enough. The very first stage, we talked about improving your skill set, and while it is still important to do that, it is now even more important to focus on building out your marketing skills. At this stage, 40% of your time is going to be spent towards actually working and helping clients, but 60% of your time is going to be all about marketing, putting yourself out there, learning outreach, learning how to position yourself. This is just the reality of freelancing. Learn how to talk about your skills in the way that resonates with your ideal clients. Study lead generation, attraction marketing, personal branding. And follow 3 creators that are in your industry. You can use this and study them so you can reverse engineer how they are marketing themselves. And I would only focus on 3 because the more that you try to look for, the more watered down your brand is going to be because you're trying to implement all these different things from different people. Just focus on 3, the less the better, and use this opportunity to figure out how to actually market yourself, how to represent yourself. The second step is to plan your escape. I know that I just told you to make a profile and find clients on Fiverr, on Upwork, but I actually do not recommend staying on these platforms for long, and this is why. The very first reason is that they will take 15% of the revenue that you make. You deserve the money that you earn. You will always have to pay 15% of that to the platform. And this also includes tip as well. And trust me, that 15% adds up over time. The second thing is that people who go on these platforms usually have a lower budget. So it means that you will hit a ceiling with how much you can charge. People on these platforms, they don't have a bigger budget. And on these platforms, people are usually charging dirt cheap for what you can do. So the fact is, it is really hard to compete on price in the long term because there will always be someone on the platform who can do it cheaper than you. It is just not sustainable long term if you want to scale your business. The third thing is that I actually find it harder to state your boundaries with clients. The reason why is because reviews on these platforms is everything. And when you are working with these clients, you will almost feel like a slave to them because they determine your reviews. If you get one negative review, it can affect the algorithm from pushing you in front of more customers. Or if you turn down a project, that could also affect how much the algorithm pushes you out to different customers. You will always be living at the mercy of these platforms. So it's just ultimately not sustainable. So how do we plan our escape? Use the testimonials that you've built up right now and transfer them to your social media pages. So start building out an Instagram, TikTok, start building out a website to represent your brand. This helps you build up trust and legitimacy that you've worked with prior clients before. Using social media is the best way to showcase your skills, to showcase what you can offer, but it's also important to showcase your personality as well. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes people want to work with you. It's how interesting you are as a person, how unique you are, and just by simply putting a combination of both your personality and your portfolio, it can make you a very strong candidate and it can make you a very strong choice to the clients that want to work with you. The next step is to use the client work that you've done for prior clients on Fiverr, on these platforms, and start posting as much as you can about the work that you've done for them. After you create these social media pages, post as much as you can about the transformation, about the clients that you worked with, what kind of problems they initially had, and how you stepped in to solve them. And post about your behind the scenes, whether being a business owner or behind the scenes around your creation process. Your social media pages are creating a brand of what people can expect when they're working with you. The third step is to focus on outreach and visibility. This is the part where you do not want to shy away from. A lot of people will try to make up excuses or come up with tasks that aren't even that important to avoid the very thing that you need to do, which is to tell people what you do and what you offer. Social media is one part, but you can do other things in the process. You can go to a local networking event with a bunch of entrepreneurs. You can tell your friends and family what you're doing and what you're working on, and you can use them as word of mouth. So here are several things that you can do throughout the week, and it is important to put yourself out there. People do not know that you exist. People do not know what you have to offer unless you tell them. The first thing is to send out 5 different proposals to different people or different companies that you want to work with. You can create Facebook ads and share your work to more people with paid ads. You can send out cold pitches or cold emails. Or you can use platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn to find clients that are the perfect match to what you have to offer. Freelancing is all about outreach. It's all about finding the people that you're a good fit to work with. And it does take a lot of bravery in the process to make yourself known. Making yourself known in many different spaces can really improve the amount of people that see what you do and see what you can offer. And while you can still work with clients on Fiverr, on these platforms, this step is really about helping you shift from that platform to finding your own clients long term. Now we're going to be talking about the final level, which is reaching your first $10,000. So this step, we're going to be removing your money blocks. $10,000 may seem like a lot, especially if you've been charging very little. And we only have so much time, so much energy, and so many resources through the day. And the fact is, we cannot charge $20 long term for the rest of our lives if we want to scale our business. So this is the opportunity to look into your money beliefs. This is actually going to be a different level of uncomfortable, but this level is where we're going to be diving into our past beliefs. We're going to be looking into our childhood. We're going to be looking at the different ways and the different angles around why we don't believe we are worthy and deserving of more money. Your mindset is everything. And if 5% of you, which is your conscious mind, is saying, I want to make $10,000 doing freelancing, but if 95% of you, which is your unconscious mind, has went through so much poverty and has went through so much lack and scarcity that you don't feel deserving of that wealth, you don't feel deserving of that money, then your 95% of your mind, like that part of you, is going to win. So how do we get our unconscious mind on board with your conscious mind, which is ultimately making that first $10,000? So the very first step is to look at what are some limiting beliefs that you have around wealth creation, specifically around freelancing. And here are some main ones that a lot of people have. The very first one is they don't believe they're good enough. This is a massive root block that a lot of freelancers have, especially women have, around charging their worth. If you think your work isn't worth higher rates, then you will always stay underpaid out of fear and guilt. The second thing is I'm a fraud or I'm an imposter, very common one. I was an accounting student and I learned everything online. This has been one of the biggest things that tripped me up when I was starting off. You look on Reddit, a lot of people deal with imposter syndrome around freelancing. This is especially common if you didn't have any sort of experience, if you didn't go to school, if you didn't go through some sort of educational background around this very thing that you're serving. The third limiting belief is that if I raise my prices, no one's going to want to work with me. That is actually completely false because a lot of high-paying clients will see your prices as a reflection of quality, as a reflection of trust. And these people will in fact find you because you are embodying that level of quality that they're looking for. So even if you have one of these limiting beliefs, I am ready to reframe and change your mindset about why all of these are false. The very first thing is that your value is not defined by what kind of credentials you have, what school you went to, but it's what kind of value you are offering and what kind of problems you are solving for that very person. There are people out there that are less skilled than you, less knowledgeable, less experienced, that are making significantly more because they genuinely believe that they are good enough just as they are. Self-belief in freelancing is everything because if you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect clients to believe in you? Feeling good enough is an energy, and some people would stay in their industries for decades and decades without raising their prices because they don't believe that they're worthy of more. But what if the most empowering and uplifting shift that you can make in your energy is to simply acknowledge that you are good enough just as you are? And when you own your value, your aligned clients that see your value, they will come flying to you. So some key practices to shift beyond and remove those limiting beliefs is to first identify your triggers. Pay attention to the moments where you feel unworthy or when you feel off in your business. For example, when you're posting a TikTok about your work, or if someone messages you about your work, or even simply the emotion that comes up when you're doing outreach, like that very uncomfortable feeling around putting yourself out there. Even the process of receiving payment from a client, I know that if we are charging prices that are kind of outside of our comfort zone, we may feel a little bit uncomfortable. But what can we do in the process? We can figure out what are the underlying beliefs behind these triggers. The second step is to acknowledge their existence and to love the emotions that come up. Triggers are absolute gold because they represent the very limiting beliefs that we have that are holding us back from creating more in our life. And it shows us where we can release and make greater room for more. Instead of ignoring the discomfort, start opening up your journal and start writing about why it is that makes you feel uncomfortable. Take the emotions out of it and just see it as a scientist. Is this objectively true? Am I objectively unworthy? And the answer is no. The more that you lovingly acknowledge the fear, the shame, the pain associated to that feeling, the more you give it that opportunity to be released. The very third thing is after you've released those emotions, now you want to replace that with positive evidence why you are good enough. Create a proof folder where you list out past client testimonials or positive feedback from clients or even comments from people that see your work and think your work is amazing. You need to give yourself as much evidence as possible that what you're doing is helping the world, that what you're doing is actually creating a positive influence, and that there are people out there that actually love what you do. You cannot be humble with this stuff with yourself because you need to see that value in order to feel confident enough to share it with the world, in order to feel confident in sharing your value when you're working with clients, so that confidence does emit. Let this folder and let this list become how you rewire your self-perception. And this folder will be especially handy if those imposter syndrome feelings start coming up again. Now, the second step to reaching your first 10K is to know about pricing psychology. Pricing is a really funny thing. My mind was absolutely blown when I came across a branding designer that was charging $50,000 for a single logo design. And that's like a down payment on a house. And I really thought back and I was looking at my prices and I was looking at her work and I was like, what's the difference? How is she able to charge $50,000 for a logo? And why am I only charging like 1% of that $50,000? Why am I automatically discounting myself when there are people out there that are charging significantly more for the very same thing? Pricing high is really scary, and I understand that, but what you can do to really help you get behind that price is to work on your money mindset, as well as working on improving your skill set around the very thing that you're offering and how you can solve greater problems or bigger problems. Pricing lives in context. A water bottle that you find at 7-Eleven could cost $2, but that same water bottle could cost $8 at an airport. So the difference isn't exactly the water bottle, but it's the context of where that bottle is in. So how can you put yourself in spaces where people can afford a higher price? So it's not about the skill. It's about the story that you tell. It's about the kind of problems you solve, and it's the overall perceived value. So ask yourself a couple of questions. What environment are you placing your offer in? How are you positioning yourself? And what kind of clients do you want to attract? When you look at $10,000, it may seem daunting, but just do the math. You can work with 10 clients at $1,000 each. You can work with 5 clients at $2,000 each. And you can work with 2 clients at $5,000 each, or 1 client at $10,000 each. When I first started freelancing and I was charging $20 for every single logo that I was creating, I had found that the clients that I worked with were actually more painful to work with. I felt like they didn't really trust my judgment, they didn't really trust my expertise, and they just had a lot to say about my work. And I know it could be a blend of, yeah, I'm just starting out, but usually you will find that the people that you work with that you're charging less, they're gonna have way more to say about your work. But now I charge significantly more, and the clients that I work with genuinely trust my expertise, and they rarely have any feedback for me. And instead, they just love my work. When you raise your prices, you will start attracting people that trust your judgment, that value your process, and they will give you way more creative freedom to do what it is that you're meant to do. Why? It's because higher prices reflect higher perceived value. It signals that you're confident. So when you are looking at raising your prices, it is important to go back to acknowledging the triggers that come up. where you don't feel worthy and work through those emotions and start poking lies around why that isn't true. Because to get to $10,000 doesn't require more hard work on the physical plane, but it's more about really acknowledging the triggers that you feel around receiving more. The third and final step to reaching your first $10,000 is to start looking for opportunities to solve greater problems. If you want to raise your prices and to start working with more aligned clients, it is time to not only continually improve your skill set, but it's also important to start spotting what kind of problems clients are actually facing. And you can start interviewing your current customers and ask about what their day-to-day is like and what kind of problems they're experiencing that you can solve. So when you are interviewing these customers, it's important to acknowledge that deeper questions give you deeper answers. So if you are a web designer, don't ask what kind of website you want. Instead, you should ask, what's the purpose of this site? Where are you losing leads or conversions right now? What do you want your clients to feel when they land on your page? Your goal is to figure out what they want achieved or what they want to avoid altogether, and then position your services as a bridge. You can also continually evolve your craft as well as continually improving the client experience over time. And you can use this intel to transform your offer and to make your offer more attractive to other potential clients. For example, if you're a web designer and your client is currently having struggles with copy, then you could maybe partner with a copywriter and start creating bundles together. Another example is if you're a social media manager and your client is having struggles with strategy, maybe you can start creating a quarterly content service to help your clients feel more at ease when it comes to content creation. More value doesn't necessarily mean more work, but it's about approaching it strategically. And we've reached the end of this video. I would love to know in the comments below what kind of freelancing services you want to start offering, because we can create a community in the comments below where we trade services and we trade testimonials. Just create a very loving and supportive community and just cheering each other on. And if you are serious about putting an action plan together so you can start creating your freelancing business, then you would want to download my worksheets down in the description below. If you want to go a step further and learn how to improve your financial life, I highly recommend checking out 6 financial goals to upgrade your soft life era. In that video, I talk about how you can start building out a long-term plan and how you can start working towards that soft life era that you've always wanted. I love and appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in all the way to the end, and I hope to see you next week. Bye!